My name is Brandon Baltes. I am running for mayor in 2023, and I'm going to be giving you my political opinions on. And the subject of this video is going to be the Education Department, the Department of Education, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. These two government agencies that I think we could reform and reduce in a big way, and it would be a win-win for everybody. And the reason is because economic growth is more auspicious when you not only make the government agencies more efficient, but also you reduce the government spending, lower taxes, balance the budget, and there's more money. And we're going to go into the more articulate version of that and why, and kind of how my thinking is how what my epistemology is and how these opinions derive, right? Henry Hazlitt, Economics in One Lesson, if you want a one-sentence answer. But in this video, that's what we're going to be covering. That's the subject. Two specific examples, government agencies that we want to, in my opinion, reduce and reform. So let's start out with why, with what my plan is, right? For mayor, I'm not going to be the president. It's not going to have a huge, not going to be able to change the country. But if I were, I would want to do these three things. Number one, lower taxes. Number two, get rid of many government agencies. That one is a lot more complicated, right? Which agencies? Are you getting rid of the damn police? The education system? What are you getting rid of? We're not getting rid of the police. We're not getting rid of education. We are getting rid of arbitrary agencies, and we're not going to get rid of. In this video, my plan, again, I said reduce and reform, not eradicate and eviscerate them. Absolutely not. But we are going to be definitely reducing the spending of many government agencies. For example, the Department of Education, and also, for example, the NRC. Okay, and that's number two. So lower taxes, get rid of some government agencies, and reduce the spending of the government in aggregate in a huge way. And number three is balance the budget. Okay, so government. So to understand where I come from here, to understand what I'm talking about, you have to understand government versus private sector efficiency. Okay, so competition drives. Competition is the key thing here that separates the government's efficiency and their incentive to work compared to the private sector efficiency. Competition. You always hear economists and capitalists proponents of capitalism, they always say competition is the key. That is why the private sector and why the government should be relatively low, or small, I should say. And that is largely, by and large, I think that is correct. So competition drives private businesses to create the highest quality product or service at the cheapest costs. Okay? Now, you may be wondering, well, if competition drives that, if that's what gets the prices down and the product so quality, the government doesn't have any of that. Holy crap! I just understood it just like that. Is it really that simple, Brandon? There's obviously we're going to go into this, but that's the fundamental gist of it, man. Competition is the key thing that government does not have any of. Is zero competition with the government. A lot of people call the government the only legal monopoly there is. They don't have competition. They don't have incentives to make whatever they're doing, whether it be building parks or keeping order, right? The police or the education system. There's no second government in America that is going to be having a rival education system where that would motivate our system to have the most high quality and lowest cost, most efficient product or service, which would be educating the future generations. We don't have that. That's not a thing, right? And this is why that's why the apathy of competition really, that's how it hurts the government, and why the private sector having that competition, that's how it drives it to create amazing products and services. This is why the stock market has done what it's done since the inception of the country in 1770 and in 1776, late 1770s, depending on when you could define it, but basically competition is the key here. Okay, so now reading a little bit more of this, I have a little note sheet here. This is why the government is oftentimes thought of as incompetent. Often they're thought of as incompetent after people see the fruit of billions and billions of dollars that the taxpayers have given to the government. For example, the Department of Education. And what I mean here is that when they see the fruit of something, and this is only people who are really thinking here, kind of, or at least somewhat, when people see what the government has done with billions of dollars, and it's like, oh wow, there's two different things. There's two different perspectives here. You can look at something and be like, okay, the government did that. They created jobs. Great, they did amazing. I'm glad that we're paying. That's where my That's where my taxes are going. I'm glad. That's good. And the other people are thinking and weighing, would that money have been more efficient and more economically auspicious and friendly and created more growth if we had not built that building for the sake of just employment or whatever it is, right? Whatever the government is doing, there's a good chance that that the money that was funding that would have been more efficient in the private sector and for the reason of competition. However, you may say, well, Brandon, you got police, you got education, you got these things that the private sector is never going to be able to do because there's no incentive for the private sector to go and build a park. How are they going to collect money for that? It's extremely impractical. You're right. That's why we need some government agencies. That's why I don't want to get rid of all the government agencies. I just want to reduce and reform some of them. Right, the arbitrary ones, the ones like, for example, we're going to go into today's video. The subject is all about education department being reformed and the NRC being reformed and reduced, the spending reduced, not eviscerated, however, very strongly reduced, especially their spending. Spurring economic growth is more auspicious with less government spending in the aggregate. Lower taxes mean more money the private sector has to spend and invest. A disadvantage of lowering taxes, however, would be that we destroy jobs that the government had created, right? If we go over here and decrease the spending of the NRC and say, hey, you guys aren't needed anymore, get out of here, man. Your agency is done. If we say that, those jobs are going to be created, and we're creating unemployment right there, man. Oh no. However, what you have to think, and this is where Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt really is brilliant. You have to understand, how did those government jobs get created in the first place, and how are they funded? Well, they're funded by they're funded by us, the citizens. They're funded by everybody, and those government jobs that were created that we are now destroying, they were created in the first place at the expense of other private jobs. So what we're doing, in a way, if the government agency is arbitrary and not needed, and they are wasting money, and they're not worth it, and they're not worth it for the taxpayers to pay whatever amount, or it's not worth it for the taxpayers for so much taxpayer dollars to be going towards it in the first place, it's better to go ahead and get rid of them. Those jobs were created at the expense of private sector jobs. Right? The government jobs, they were created at the expense of the private sector jobs. Every time you hire somebody in the education system or any government employee, right? Those people are, obviously they're not going to be working in the private sector then, right? All their time that's going to be in the government, they're not going to be spending in the private sector. They're going to be taking the money of the citizens to pay themselves, and they do not have competition to drive them, or their bosses, or whoever, or any of them to drive them towards creating the highest quality product or service, because otherwise they're going to go out of business. The government's never going to go out of business unless people like me come in here and say, hey, you're hurting the economy. Your job is arbitrary. You're taking taxpayer dollars. It's not worth it to have us here. You should go out and get in the private sector, where competition is actually going to force you to be efficient and economically spur growth, which a rising tide lifts all boats. And if we could spur economic growth, that doesn't just help the 1%. It doesn't just help a few people. That helps everybody. The more auspicious our economy is, the better our economy is doing, the better it is for everybody in the aggregate, man. And of course, that's not going to solve all the suffering in the world, but it's obviously better to have more economic growth than not. Can we all agree on that? This is why we should lower taxes, lower the government spending dramatically, and balance the budget for the first time in an egregiously long time. Now, for the education system and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So the education system is kind of, I'm pretty sure everybody already agrees with me here. The education system and department is it's a train wreck. It's a train wreck. And the curriculum alone should prove this to you if you're not from America, or you were homeschooled or something, right? Let me just explain to you something. In a lot of schools, art is required for a semester. This was my high school as well. My high school was required, you were required to take art for a whole semester, 2 quarters. And Liberty and Law only had a requirement for 1 quarter. Liberty and Law is the one where you learn how to vote, how to understand the government, what the relationship between the government and the citizens are, how the government gets created, the Constitution, the amendments, the whole process, the whole deal, what we're talking about right now, right? Economic growth, these sort of things. Although you don't get to much of this stuff that we're talking about because there's only 1 quarter of time. You don't get to this stuff that we're talking about in school because they want to spend your time learning how to draw a cat and paint all the and do everything and learn what lines are called and opaqueness, and you learn these things that are great. There's a fine career in art. I love art. I play guitar, and that's a form of art, right? I enjoy art. I like painting, actually, believe it or not. I don't do it much, right? But art is fine. However, required for a semester, the government spending, the education department spends, let's see here. What was their budget? Let's see. I can pull up their budget here. Okay, so 2016, their 2016 budget was $79 billion. You got $79 billion into the Department of Education, and they can't even get the curriculum to be competent. It's objectively true that requiring art for double the amount of time, that the art is double the requirement of time that you have to take it in a class than a government class where you have to learn the basics of the Constitution and some amendments. That is objectively incoherent and not. That's precarious. That's a precarious education system. And $79 billion, 79 billion people, or not 70 billion, billion dollars cannot fix the curriculum. We need to reform it. We need to reform it, and we need to decrease the spending. Because if there's one thing we've learned in the last few decades or even centuries, is that increasing the education budget does not result in better education quality. Better education quality largely derives from smart plans and reform and having good curriculums and having good schedules and plans and ways for the kids to actually learn, our future generations to actually be educated. Not having an emphasis on drawing, but having an emphasis on how the world works and how the government works. Constitution, amendment. A lot of people hate the president, hate the administration. This decade, last decade, 21st, all the 21st century, right? Plenty of people complain about all the politicians being horrible. Maybe they're so horrible because so few people are actually introduced to the system in school. We only have 1 damn quarter of required learning in the broad realm of government, which is a huge realm. Maybe that's why the politicians are so corrupt and they're so undesirable, right? Reforming the education system and reducing the spending is obvious. It's anyone with a brain would do this, right? At least pass. Okay, you got to be careful when you write up new bills and when you create new bills. Getting rid of bills is a better idea, because the more bills that we have in the aggregate, the more stuff that the government does, the more people that the government's gonna hire, the more money they're gonna spend, the less the private sector is gonna benefit, the higher the taxes are gonna be, right? It all makes sense now. I hope, right? And remember, make your own opinion. Don't let me persuade you. Make your own opinion. I'll change. I am open to changing my opinion. If you have something you disagree with me on, please feel free. I will actually talk to you, right? I will actually talk to you, unlike any other politician. I'm not a politician, right? I am actually going to run for mayor, so I guess you could define me as a politician here soon in a couple of years, if I get elected, of course, which we'll see. But I will respond to your comments, and I will argue the other side every freaking time. And I do that in the live streams on the finance channel, Perilous Dissent, one of the only YouTubers that actually talks to the opposing side and talks it through. And I'm going to continue. I'm going to do this my entire time as mayor and however far I go in the government. And I'm also actually going to have somebody follow me around all day, if it's allowed, and literally film everything so I can stop the corruption and prove to people that I'm doing what I say I am. I don't know why no one does this. It's just obvious stuff like that. In my opinion, we'll see if I get elected or if anything happens. But back to the education. It's common sense to reform this, and you'd think with $79 billion they would have at least fixed and got the curriculum across most of the states to be decent. But no, I know this from personal experience. I mean empirical data and my own anecdotal evidence when I was actually in school dealing with the crappy curriculum. It points to a clear conclusion, which is reform and reduce the spending of education. Now, the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So this is one where nuclear energy is a whole rabbit hole that we are going to go down on this show is going to do. However, I want to talk about today why we should reform the NRC and not only decrease the spending, but just get rid of some of the things that they have. Now, I'm on the actual website itself, the nrc.gov here. I have not even looked at this very much. I'm not super knowledgeable of what's going on here because there's 1,000 things going on here. But what I'll tell you is that there are 199 parts on this website for just the rules and criteria and everything you have to do if you want to create a nuclear reactor and if you want to open up a nuclear reactor. There are 199 things, and every single one of them, you click on one of them, it takes you to an entire part. The every single one of these is an essay. In my opinion, taking 7 to 10 years, if you don't know much about nuclear energy, you can research it and you can fact check me here, but for now, take my word for it. It takes, on average, right, I'm not an expert on nuclear energy, but I've done a fair amount of research, right, 5 to 10 years, usually getting closer to the latter number. It usually takes about that time to open up a nuclear reactor, a new one, to build and open it up and get it actually commercially running. Does that, you may say, well, Brandon, nuclear energy is extremely dangerous. We've had plenty of accidents in the past. Historically, the nuclear energy is extremely dangerous. That is completely required. I would argue absolutely not. It's not required. This is a deep argument that we can go into, but I'll put it as concisely as possible here. Basically, the death per unit energy acquired or produced, the death per energy unit produced, nuclear energy ranks last in terms of death per energy unit produced. Last. Solar energy, wind, gas, coal, okay, oil, all this stuff, literally nuclear energy is the last. Okay? And also let me say that all of the main accidents, the 3 Mile Island, the Fukushima, all of these accidents, Chernobyl, right? These accidents, everyone likes to say we're going to get another Chernobyl if we start doing nuclear energy. Almost all of those, essentially all of them, right? There's debate among a few. It's hard to get any accurate information from reliable sources. However, most of them, it's objectively true that most of them had neglected safety protocols, and that was the reason why they actually resulted in accidents. And also, guess what? Overall, all of those accidents don't even add up to, they're like under 1,000 deaths. Okay, I think they're only a few hundred, if that, but I'll be conservative. It's better to under-promise, over-deliver, so I'll say under 1,000-ish, right? Easily. Okay, I think so. Fact check me, prove me wrong, and comment it. It's common sense as well here to decrease and I'm not a nuclear energy scientist. I would have to get somebody who understands it more than I do, much more than I do, or I would have to research it and actually get in there and actually understand the science behind it more. But there needs to be a decrease in amount of time that it takes to open up a plant. Nuclear energy is, I mean, you heard what I said. It ranks last in the deaths per energy unit produced. And it takes the longest to get one plant running than anything else in the world. It takes 10 years. I'm not saying we should just make it clean slate, anyone open up a nuclear reactor plant anytime. No, I'm saying let's strategically go in here. And I don't have the exact parts for you, right? But what I can tell you is that some of these parts, these 199 parts that every single one of them has a full text version of, some of these need to be reduced. And the time for opening up a nuclear reactor, it needs to decrease. People always worry about global warming, climate change. Nuclear energy doesn't emit any emissions. It doesn't emit any waste into the air. Okay? This should be a priority to get these things running up as soon as possible, you'd think. Not let's stifle them at every turn that we can. We want to expedite that process. We want to expedite the process of getting nuclear reactor plants up and running in a safe and efficient way. Not 10 years to get one plant up and running. With the new technology, there's fail-safes installed where it's virtually, I mean, it is literally impossible for there to be a disaster happening outside of the relatively small range of the plant. So, to me, that is another obvious thing that we need to reduce and reform. Nuclear energy, Nuclear Regulatory Committee, and the Education and the Department of Education. There are also several different agencies, and I have a couple pulled up here in a great article, like the Internal Revenue Service. Their 2016 budget was just under $11 billion. And these guys are the Internal Revenue Service. They do taxation sort of things. There's been numerous scandals with these guys, and okay, there's plenty of room for reforming and reducing the budget that these guys have. Also, for example, the Department of Health and Human Services. Right, a lot of people complain about about our health system in America, and there's the debate going on whether we should have the government universal health care or whether we should just leave it to the private businesses. And this is a raging debate. I'm sure we're going to do that video, and I'm sure we're going to do a video on that. Absolutely, but I'm sure most of you can guess whether I am fond of the government taking up a huge responsibility, which would be health, and spending subsequently an enormous amount of, an exorbitant amount of money, and raising the taxation to, I would call as well, exorbitant levels. In order to do that, you can guess whether I'm liking the idea. Probably not, right? Probably not. And there's plenty of reform and reducing. I mean, $80 billion were these guys' budget in 2016. Employees deemed essential, according to themselves, is 48% were deemed essential, right? If they're saying themselves that half of their employees are not essential, that tells me there's probably at least some degree of spending decreases that we can afford in the Department of Health and Human Services here. Most likely. And my point here is not to say we need to get rid of this stuff. No, if I'm going to tell you, if I ever get to the spot where I am actually high up in government and proposing bills to actually get rid of and actually trying to get rid of these agencies, or some of them, not all, I'm not getting rid of these agencies, just reducing and reforming them as I've been saying. If I'm going to ever get to that point, I will look much more closely into the actual agency and see what specific parts of it and which under who which people do we need to get rid of, and what niches are not necessary. Right now, I'm just trying to make the point that in these agencies, there's plenty of room for clearing stuff out. And why are we clearing stuff out? Why am I trying to send all these people home without a job? Because every single job that the government creates, they destroy one in the private sector. And also, when the government has a large amount of people, you have to understand the government is not as efficient as the private sector in doing things. We already explained this, right? There's no competition driving any of these agencies to create the highest quality product or service. This is why the government healthcare has never been the best. This is why when people have to go and get a serious surgery done, they don't go to Canada. They come to the U.S. They leave Canada and they come to the U.S. Right? Although anyone can get healthcare in Canada, the good healthcare, the high quality healthcare, you got to come to the U.S. because it's because the fundamental reason of competition in the private sector. That is where that derives, and that is a key point. And also, you need to understand you also have to understand the benefits of us getting rid of these agencies, not getting rid, but we're getting rid of some and reforming and reducing the spending in a huge way on a lot of these agencies. We're freeing up space and money, and we're doing what we can to not only balance the budget but also lower taxes. The reason why we're going to be able to lower taxes and not bankrupt the government, because we're going to lower the taxes and maybe increase the government's income, maybe the national income, maybe, right? There's an argument for that. This video is not on that, but let's just assume it doesn't. Let's just assume when we lower taxes, we're going to decrease the government's income from taxes in a huge way, right? Oh no. Well, we're going to offset that and compensate that. We're going to compensate it and then some by decreasing the government's spending in a huge way and reducing the government's budget and getting rid of the arbitrary agencies and reducing and reforming the vast majority of the ones that I think are, not the police. I don't know if the police would be the best agency to get rid of. Or, there's plenty of agencies there's plenty of agencies that I don't want to do much to, but in a lot, not almost all of them, I don't know about almost all of them, but in many of them, there's room for reforming and more efficient budgets and focuses on what they're doing, right? Because I'm sure everybody is aware of what the government does, and not what the government does, but the proclivity for corrupt things to happen and happen because of government employees. I'm sure everybody is aware of those. So getting rid of some of the spending and decreasing the spending, we would give us a chance to lower taxes. People have more, me and you, we all have more money in our pockets at the end of the day, able to spend more. The demand is able to increase. The purchasing power increases with it, giving us the chance to increase the demand and spur more economic growth. That's as simple as it gets. And my two specific examples in this episode, in this show, was the Education Department and the Nuclear Regulatory Committee. To be clear, I want to, and of course, obviously, over time, my exact conclusions could change slightly, or even they could change even more than that, right? I always try to have as open of a mind as I can, and always try to change my opinion whenever I'm wrong, which I am plenty of times. However, right now, this is what is clear to me. The governments, there are plenty of agencies that need to be reformed, and this spending is outrageous. We need to reform them. These are two agencies I think we could do very well by effectuating that. We would free up money for, and we would have to do more than just these two. Obviously, we'd have to do double digits easily and reform and reduce the government's budget and spending in a huge way, huge way. That's how we balance the budget. That's how we lower taxes and spur more economic growth than ever before in history. That's how we do it. And also, we've got the debt problem, and we don't even talk about the debt. We haven't even talked about the debt problem whatsoever yet. We also got that we would fix, by and large, by balancing the budget. That's the first step. That's how we do that. There are a myriad of benefits of doing this. And why and how? Where is that derived from? Economic growth. Economic growth is not just something that's going to help the rich people. It's something that helps everybody. If you're in a country with a stagnant economy, you have such a lower chance of doing what you want in any sort of job than in a country that had a booming economic growth, or not even booming, but more than stagnant, moving in the right direction. Some more topics that we're going to do soon are going to be the more examples of agencies that I want to get rid of, or not get rid of. Well, some that I want to get rid of. There are plenty of that I want to get rid of, but more so, there's going to be more overall that I want to reform and reduce the spending for. And we're going to do videos on nuclear energy. We're going to do minimum wage, healthcare. Pretty much any political topic we're going to go through eventually. Eventually, we're going to do everything. And we're starting off with my more passionate, I would say, more the topics I'm more interested in, which is taxes and the government relationship between interventionists, and not so much into the economy. The government is. And we're gonna do plenty of topics, absolutely plenty of topics. Unions, right? We're gonna do if unions are good or bad, and if we should have a minimum wage to begin with. We're gonna do all of these things, and the inflation, or the current inflation situation, all these things. And with that being said, that is the video. If I had to sum up what we talked about in one sentence here today, I would say the education department and the nuclear regulatory committee should be reformed, and their spending and their budgets should be reduced in a big way. This is because we can lower taxes. We can lower taxes and balance the budget. We can spur more economic growth if we were to do this. That's probably how I would sum this up. And with that being said, thank you all so much. Feel free to click off. Feel free to also check out Perilous Dissent on YouTube. That's my finance channel. That's the stock channel. Thank y'all so much. Make your own opinions. I will see y'all in the next one.